All right, that should be it. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Granted. Today I'm here with one of my favorite teachers of all time, Mr. Sumner. Welcome, Mr. Sumner. Do you want to introduce yourself for the people?
I will do that. Number one, thanks for having me, Grant.
Yes.
It is an honor to be on Granted. So thanks for having me. But my name is Sumner. I am a IB psychology teacher at Northfield High School, and I teach SL, HL, Year 1, and Year 2.
Yeah, I was thinking about it earlier that, as a senior, I'm almost done, but then you still have the juniors that you have to teach, which is like kind of a trade-off. But then you have less classes that you're going to be teaching coming up here in a couple weeks, right?
Yeah, so because I teach basically all of IB, you guys are all done on April 30th. So all of my classes are about to be finished this year. And then what the IB teachers do is we proctor all the IB exams, just minus yours.
Right.
So I'll be proctoring for like those 2 weeks.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll still be busy, but just not technically with students in the classroom anymore.
Okay, so even on April 30th, the juniors are done?
Yeah, because they're an IB, they're an SL one-year class, so even the SL one-year classes get excused as well. Yeah.
That's right. Well, so one thing I'm curious about is, you work at Northfield now, but how many different schools have you taught at before this, and which school's been your favorite over that time?
So for me, I'm actually on my 11th-ish year teaching. And how, I was going to talk about it a little bit later, but I guess I can go into it now. How that really started was I student taught in the spring, and I worked to find a job all summer, and nobody would hire me, right? Mm-hmm. It was the cliche of, you don't have any experience. So the question is, how do you get experience if you're not willing to grant me a job to get me the experience, right? So it was tough. Well, so I couldn't find a job come like August 15th, right? So the school year started, and I ended up getting a 3-year sublicense and a 5-year sublicense. And what I did was I was just trying to sub, and I was also working at Sam's number 3, the diner downtown. Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening to me was the school that I did a lot of my college hours with through Metro called me and was like, "Hey, Kian, have you found a job yet?" And I was like, "No, actually, I've been applying like crazy, and no one will really give me that like go ahead to get me the experience I need." So they actually said they had a teacher quit, and if I was willing to, I could go teach there. But since it was actually a strange year, because the government shut down, they're the ones who do all the background checks, so I couldn't get a background check through like most of October, and I actually ended up, I think, starting on my birthday, October 21st was my first real day. But what's funny now is DPS says that I've only taught for like 11 3/4 years or something. Like they only count that as 3/4 years because I started in October. So long story short, 11 years. But I would say, so I student taught at Legend in Parker. Okay. Right, so Douglas County, which was definitely pretty interesting. I grew up in Castle Rock, so I was down at Douglas County. So I went to Douglas County High School, so kind of working for, one of our rivals when I was in high school. And so my first job was at MLK out in Green Valley, where I taught for 6 years. Then after that, I taught at DCIS in Montbello for 3 years until that school closed to start the new Montbello High School. And then now this is my second year at Northfield.
Wow, that's a long journey.
Yes.
And so you said you started teaching on your birthday. And that was at Metro, or it was
that
somewhere
was
else?
at MLK in Green Valley. So they kind of like figured out how to get me to teach, but I still couldn't start till like that third week of October. But yeah, I remember it was a Monday, and that was my first day teaching. Was also my birthday. So
were you like super nervous, or were you kind of ready to get that experience?
I was definitely ready to get that experience, but I was definitely very nervous.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like you're nervous because you don't know what you're doing. You're nervous because you don't know how the kids will react to you. You're nervous because you don't know where anything is. you're nervous, you know, you don't want to ask too many questions and annoy your peers and your neighbors around you, but you know, if anyone who knows me knows, I already ask a lot of questions.
Right.
So I had a lot of questions, just like, what am I doing? Where am I going? So it was definitely nervous and anxious, but it was good, and it went well.
Yeah.
You know, I think the kids enjoyed it. That first year, it's fun to look back on my stuff that I created then and kind of like cringe a little bit because I'm
Right.
like, oh, these poor kids had to deal with this because they ended up giving me 3 classes. So I ended up with AP Psychology, World History, and U.S. History,
Whoa.
which, you know, usually even experienced teachers don't, you know, if the plan allows, like, don't get more than 2 different classes.
Right.
Right. So having to plan 3 with them being pretty higher level, upper level classes, especially AP Psychology, it was very, very busy.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've been all over, and now you're at Northfield. And how long have you been at Northfield again? It was.
This is now my 2nd year at Northfield.
Okay. Wow. So you're newer to the school then.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yep.
So how do you like it compared to the other schools?
I you know, I like all of them for different reasons. So, you know, I don't know if I can really like determine which one I like better compared to the others because they were all like different parts and pieces of like the chapter that is my story. So like MLK was great because like I met a lot of good people and I had a lot of really strong mentors and really strong teachers that helped, you know, take me under their wing. It was very foundational for me. I like figured out a lot about how to like create relationships and talk to and like, you know, just be with the students and kind of, you know, I guess foundational is probably just the best way to say it. Like just kind of like those roots in those early days. So that was a lot of fun. It was definitely an interesting time. Like I was out there during the teacher strike, which was very interesting. And so loved MLK for that purpose. And it kind of like set me on the trajectory I was, you know, kind of that got me to here. DCIS in Montbello was also awesome. It was great because I had become pretty comfortable at MLK, and it wasn't so much that I was scared to really go out on my own, but, you know, I had all of these friends and all these great colleagues at MLK, so it was kind of nerve-wracking to leave and say goodbye to them and say goodbye to all of these kids and all that I had known.
Right.
And so DCIS was great because I went out on my own. None of like the teachers from MLK ended up working at DCIS, so it was really just me and no one knew who I was. So that was awesome, and I got to teach psychology. Plus I got to teach some really cool college classes. I taught Colorado history. I taught women in U.S. history. I ended up getting to teach history of Latin America. So that was a lot of fun because I got some, you know, more experience in different classes. And then Northfield, you know, is just totally different because it's also the biggest high school I've ever worked at. If you know MLK and DCIS, they were both very tiny. I think, you know, one of our class, like the sophomore class this year or next year is 600 kids.
Huge.
That's how many kids were in MLK total. Or close to it with like the middle school being attached, and then DCIS kind of the same. There was only maybe 100 kids per grade,
Right.
So maybe 400 total high schoolers. Now there's more than 400 kids in one class, so definitely big and exciting. But that's always what I've wanted. Like I grew up in Illinois at a very traditional high school, so I really wanted like the big like sports vibe and dances and clubs and a lot of the things that you kind of miss out on at a little school because it's just tough to do that stuff because with not a lot of teachers, you end up having to do multiple things. Where at Northfield, right, everyone kind of has their niche and they do that, and it kind of like weaves itself together in this fabric that then like kind of makes Northfield.
Yeah. And so do you think working at those smaller schools you were able to grow closer to your students, or is it kind of the same for both?
I think that relationships are my number one most important thing as a teacher. So I definitely have created great relationships at all the schools I've been at. It's just when you were at MLK or DCIS, right, you knew every senior, right?
Yeah.
And usually with those smaller kind of neighborhood schools in Green Valley and Montbello, I ended up teaching like brothers and sisters. You know, I knew the parents. really well just because it was tinier, right? Like with you guys, I have 120-ish, 5-ish seniors, right? But that's only like 1/3 or 1/4 of you. So I don't know a lot. I don't know everyone where you do know everyone and every teacher at DCIS and MLK.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, kind of to stem off of the teacher path, when you were a child, what type of job did you dream of having? And like, why did you think that? Because everyone has like the idea when they're younger. I talked to a kid today at work. He was like, I'm going to go to the NBA and then I'm going to be an astronaut. And I was like, okay, those are those are some sick dreams right there. So like, what kind of dreams did you have when you were younger of what you wanted to do?
So I grew up in Illinois till about 8th grade. And I bounced around a little bit in my early, like when I was really little, but for the most part, we settled in like West Chicago and Wheaton, Illinois. And so there, sports was very big, and both of my parents are very athletic and played a lot of sports. So for me, sports was everything. And so growing up like in elementary school and then moving into middle school and then kind of moving out of high school, moving into like freshman football camp and wrestling camps and all of this stuff, I always just figured that I would just play sports.
Yeah.
I don't, right, being in elementary school and middle school, you don't really know that like, hey, 0.0001% of high school athletes actually make it to the pros. Right, so I didn't have any idea, but I think that I really wanted to be a professional athlete. I really loved playing baseball, and I really loved playing football, and I just figured one of those would probably work out.
Yeah.
And then when I moved from Illinois to Colorado, it got a little bit different because, just like there's drama in politics and all things, like it was very political at Douglas County. And they basically told me that like the baseball team and the wrestling team and the football team had already been decided long ago because these kids had been playing all of middle school together and they were going to like move up together. And that if anything, I could sit on the bench and watch. And if anything ever happened, I could kind of like move into one of those spots. And that really left a sour taste in my mouth. And I actually ended up quitting most sports during high school.
Yeah, I definitely understand that because some of these schools, they already have, like you said, they have predetermined teams. It makes it really hard, especially because you were probably good, right?
Yeah.
You were good enough to be on the team, but they said, no, these kids have been around. We're going to pick them.
Yeah, and what was actually funny is like by my junior year, they were asking me to come play.
Wow.
And I was already in just such a different path, and I was kind of like playing ultimate Frisbee. I was hiking a ton. I was snowboarding a lot. Like I kind of had left the traditional sports for like the newer, more, extreme Colorado outdoorsy, sports. And I kind of never looked back. I do regret it though. I really try to not live my life with any regret, but that is one of my biggest regrets is that I quit playing sports because I devoted my whole early life to that. So I wouldn't be who I am today. I mean, I wouldn't even be sitting here with you doing this if I had played sports and stayed in Illinois because there was all this stuff going on. There were families that were like ready to harbor me and be like, hey, you can live in Illinois and go to high school in Illinois and you can go back home to Colorado, like almost like I was at a boarding school with like some of my football friends' parents are like, hey, Kean, you can live in our basement for 4 years.
Wow.
So I had some opportunities, but it just never felt right. And then I met some kids that wanted to play music, and then I started playing music and never really looked back from that and were playing sports. And so that's
so it was around your freshman or sophomore year that you quit.
Right.
And then you got into ultimate Frisbee and music after that time.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah. And you're still doing those two today, right?
Yeah, I still record now. I record with my best friend and I. He plays a handful of instruments, and I play the other handful, and we record all that music ourselves and just try and push it out online whenever we have time to kind of like get a song down, mix it, and master it. But yeah, I still do that, and I am now the ultimate Frisbee coach at Homefield.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Those two things are super unique and amazing. I actually forgot that you guys recorded and posted, which is awesome. Like,
yeah, we actually learned and I've been recording in studios and stuff on and off since probably the early 2000s, I think. I think I was 20 or 21 when I first went into a real professional studio to record an album. And I never really learned much about recording. I was kind of more into just writing and playing. And just somebody would hit record and tell me where to stand and what to play and where to sing. And eventually I got to the point where I wanted to start doing that myself. And then with COVID, it kind of like pushed it into this spot where I was like, okay, I'm going to start figuring out how to record things myself and mixing and mastering and producing and engineering and all that stuff.
Right. And so what instruments do you play? How many and which ones?
You know, I don't know how many. I started out playing piano. That's really where I started. And then I started playing guitar and singing. I can play bass. I can play drums. I can play mandolin a little bit and banjo. I've messed around on violin. We have a flute at the house. Not real great at it. Probably wouldn't say I played flute. I can tinker around on it. But I can also play the ukulele. We've got harmonicas. We do a lot of like piano and organ in our music. So somewhere around there, I can play a bunch of those. It's kind of like when you get the foundational stuff from the piano and then learning how to read music and read tablature and guitar stuff, it kind of trickles out and you can kind of figure out how to play other instruments if you can play a couple.
Right. It's kind of like languages.
Yeah.
Once you learn one, you can do the rest.
You're better and you pick up the others quicker.
Yeah.
So I can definitely like with the mandolin or something, I can definitely tinker around on it and play chords, and I could probably play a rhythm to like a bluegrass song. I'm definitely not like a lead mandolin player or anything, but I can play a fair amount. But mainly guitar and sing is what I do.
Yeah, you're like a one-man show. You can play damn near everything. That's pretty insane.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just being forced with Caleb and I, who's my buddy, to just, once you kind of get older and start having kids and wives and lives and everything, it's tough to really organize 3 or 4 people to really create a band, to have a band practice and band schedule. So it's much easier for him and I to just work together. So we kind of started figuring out how to play a bunch of these instruments out of necessity.
Right.
Because we're like, hey, we need bass. We don't have a bass player. Hey, we want organ or piano, or hey, we want a harmonica part, or let's maybe add violin or something. And it's just kind of like, all right, well, we've got to figure out how to play that because we don't really bring other people in and just don't have the time.
That's a dope solution. Just learn it.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, learn it.
That's right.
Yeah.
You can figure it out. So.
All right, I'm gonna adjust your microphone real quick before we get into the next question.
Too far away?
No, I think I just get a little paranoid when it's like angled because this is where it captures most of it.
Gotcha.
So you're good.
Cool.
You're good now. Just want to make sure the people can hear you. You know
I gotcha.
What I mean? Yeah. So the next question I had for you was, like, being a teacher. Obviously, dealing with kids is your main job, and obviously we're not super young, but we all have our bad days, and so do the kids influence how much you enjoy your job? Does a bad group of kids necessarily make you enjoy teaching less, or is it kind of just something that comes with it and you just go along with each group?
When you guys ask me, who's your favorite student, who don't you like, I'll never really tell you those things.
Yeah, never.
But the only thing that I really ever say is there's really only been one student. I think if I've had like over 100 students per year on 11 years, I'm on like 1,000+ kids. I think I've really only had one student that I didn't really get along with, and we actually ended up making up and figuring it out years after he graduated.
Yeah.
He apologized and I apologized, and we kind of like figured it out. So I don't think really ever there's like a bad kid. Plus, like, to go back to just kind of getting into teaching, part of how I got into teaching was wanting to help kind of the kids that were tougher or that didn't follow that traditional path. So I don't think there's any really tough kid. The kids definitely make it for me, like make it enjoyable and ever changing. And sometimes, stressful. I think the most stress I ever get is just grading.
Yeah.
Like grading, and it's mainly because you guys want your grades back, which I don't blame you, right? And just sometimes when I have 120 massive things turned in, right, that's like a fair amount of grading. And so like the only thing that I don't really like is just all the grading, but that's a big part of what we're doing,
right?
And just getting you the growth and moving you where you need to be. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah,
I really enjoy it. I've had one job where I worked in a cubicle, and I was a debt collector for a car company.
Wow.
And I don't think I even lasted 3 months. I just hated sitting in a cubicle all day. It was just very bad. But no, I really enjoy teaching. I love everything about it. And I hate this kind of saying of like, if you find something you love, you never work a day in your life. But I think it is really true. Like it doesn't really seem like the work, like on Sunday nights, I'm not dreading Monday mornings or anything. Like I really enjoy going to school and being in school. And I just think learning and teaching and intelligence and education and ideas and conversations and collaboration, I think those are like some of the coolest things that humans have going for them.
Absolutely.
So I definitely like being around like all the electricity and the vibe, and when we have those deep conversations and they get a little bit spicy. And,
yes.
Kids insult each other and then make up and say sorry, or like don't make up, and it's fine still because we're okay with disagreeing with each other. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, so with all the good things that come with teaching, if you had to pick one aspect that's your favorite, what would you say it is?
I really enjoy when students figure things out, right? When you kind of see the lights turn on. I think that's one of the coolest things, when kids are like, oh, I get it now. Or, when you are teaching them something and they're not getting it, and you figure out a way to explain it in a different way, or a way that may make more sense to them, and they're all of a sudden like, oh, I get it now. And then just watching them grow, like watching you guys grow from the first time we started doing like our paper ones and paper twos a year and 3/4 ago to like where you guys are now, right? It's just really cool to see your guys' evolution, and that's what I really love, is being a mentor to you guys and talking about movies and music and the news and politics and like all the stuff that just comes along with like getting to know you guys and you guys getting to know me.
Yeah, it's definitely bigger than, one thing that I always appreciated about you is it was always bigger than teaching. And it's like you said, you establish a relationship with your students that some teachers don't do. And it's kind of like we have a relationship and you have a relationship with your students where you can talk about stuff other than psychology. You can talk about anything and it can be a good time. And so I think that's pretty valuable to have, for sure, and a good teacher.
Well, and I think when we're spending like 2 years together and living at school together, right? Like if you really think about it, we spend more time together than you spend with your parents.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're going home at like 6 or 7 o'clock after practice or something. Like you see them for an hour or two and you're back asleep and then you're back at school, right? And we're at school together like 8-9 hours a day. So I think relationships are the number one most important thing, especially when the topic can be tough, right? Because I think when it's hard, right, and kids need to be vulnerable and, like frustrated and like stumbling around, like trying to figure out like difficult concepts, I think it's much better when you like trust each other and you feel open enough to like ask questions, or maybe like look dumb, right? Like, like, oh, I don't want to ask because I'm going to look bad in front of my peers. But if we can kind of like all get on this like same level, like no one really feels bad about asking clarifying questions or questions that will drive the conversation and push it somewhere else. And relationships are number one in my book. Everything else will figure itself out.
Right.
Like relationships happen, then any subject can be learned. Chemistry, math, English, theater, right? Drama, psychology, history, whatever. Like once you kind of figure each other out, right, then you can really just learn whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like psychology was just kind of like this like background thing that we're learning while we're going through this like stage of our lives together. So
yeah, it's big. it's really easy to feel like, from my perspective, sometimes it's really easy to feel alone and like you don't have your peers there to help you. And, working together to solve or to share ideas, kind of how we've grown as a class to collaborate a little bit more, is huge. But even from your perspective, do you think you've seen like an increase in collaboration from our junior year to our senior year? Do you think you've seen a lot more idea sharing and less, social shunning or whatever?
Yeah, I definitely do. Like, as you guys got more comfortable, as you guys matured, like I think there's a big maturity spike that happens from like junior year to senior year, right? So I definitely think that we got stronger as a class and conversations got better, right? Just think about those conversations like the first month of school, and now we're almost in like the 20th month of school together.
Yeah,
right. Because if you think about it, come August, it will be 24 months, and you guys are going to graduate in May, so we're like on like 18, 19 months of knowing each other.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think it's gotten better, and I think I've gotten better and just understanding the whole model that our school is based on, or especially some of those higher classes, right? Just understanding how to do that, because it's definitely a version of psychology that I had never taught before. So it was a learning curve for me, but I think it's going great.
Yeah. Well, kind of to switch the pace up a little bit. So earlier in the year, I don't even remember when it was exactly relevant, but boom, AI hits us with a bang and school changes very quickly, at least the way I witnessed it. And so with AI being introduced into education, how do you think it's going to change education? And is it going to be encouraged to use in the future or discouraged? Because a lot of students will cheat using ChatGPT or whatever it is. And obviously that's definitely not a positive side, but you can also use it for good. So how do you think about AI and education intertwined?
So I think about AI just like I think about a lot of different educational tools. That's what I think it is. It's a tool.
Yeah.
Right? So I think... Right, some jobs you need a hammer, some jobs you need a screwdriver, some jobs you need, right, like another tool, like an awl or something, some you need a planer. So I think in reality, I don't think we need to be as worried in education, because the other thing that I can always do is just give you a pencil and a piece of paper and be like, here, prove it.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Let me put your phone in the phone zone, put your computer away. Now prove to me what you know. So I definitely think it's here to stay, right? Never going to go away. It's kind of like cell phones. There's nothing we can really do except some crazy event that happens and all the satellites fall out of the sky, which we know is really highly unlikely. So I just think you need to figure out how to use it. Is there a lot of cheating going on? Yes, there is. But that's if you design it like that. Like if I say, yo, Grant, answer these 3 questions electronically, bring them back the next day, and you may not want to read them, you can just put those questions right into ChatGPT, kind of get the answer, manipulate the answer a little bit so it doesn't look like straight up AI, but you don't really know anything. You might have learned a little bit from reading through what it spit out, right? But then once again, I can just be like, well, here's a pencil and a piece of paper. You can't GPT this.
Right.
Right? Show me what you know. So
right.
I think as a teacher, you need to embrace it. I don't think you should be scared of it. I think there's other areas of AI that we need to be a little bit more worried about, which we can go into more. But I think as far as education goes, just don't create assignments which allow the kids to cheat very easily with it. If you notice, do I give you electronic assignments to take home and answer anymore?
No.
You write everything and you write it in front of me. So I think you can get around that. I think it will be both encouraged and discouraged. I think, we're talking about, I think for an assignment like that, you would be discouraged from, using it when you go home. But I think also if you're yo, ChatGPT, what are 25 studies I should know for paper 1 and paper 2 in IB psychology, it will kick you out a pretty good answer.
Right.
That's still, you're going to have to create note cards or flashcards or whatever, right? You're still going to have to store that in your brain and get it back out when you need it, right? So I don't think it's as scary as people think. But like I said, it's just a tool, and you just got to figure out, is this the tool that we need for this job, or is it a different one? So.
Right. Okay, well, AI also kind of relates to the question about technology. Over time, when did you grew up without technology, obviously, and so I almost wish I have a phone in my pocket at all times. I almost wish that I could go back to a time where there weren't phones or weren't any technology, and AI is just kind of part of how technology advances. But, do you think technology, and as it advances, do you think it's more of a negative thing or a positive thing? And do you think your kids will be impacted by this? How will they be impacted and stuff like that?
Oh, so, I mean, that's a tough one. Like, yeah, it would be cool to go back in time and, like, not let you guys have cell phones. But, I mean, you create a bunch of cool stuff with cell phones. You guys are, like, coding and creating apps and, like doing all sorts of really cool things. I can't even really think of examples off the top of my head, but just think about like advances in like medicine and advances in like architecture and mathematics and some of these other things that you guys are doing. So I think as memory becomes less important, right, because our phones are our memory, I think you really got to figure out, is the information being retained or just ingested? And so, how does it impact my children, my my biological kids, like not you guys' kids? Is it's all they know, right? Which is pretty scary. But scary for whom? More scary for me, not for them, because like I said, it's like all they know. So, they're like, I couldn't type as well as my kids type until I was like 28 years old. Like, I didn't get a cell phone until I was 26.
Right. Yeah,
and
that's
you guys
crazy.
Can't even, can't even contemplate that world. So, yeah, the world was different, but, I think there's some really cool things. I think the biggest problem with cell phones is just social media.
Yes.
Just the judgment and the bullying and the comparison and... because remember, like, you're only seeing people's greatest hits.
You are.
And we've talked about this. Like, you don't really, unless, like, that person is pretty open and honest, you're not seeing, like, the worst parts of people's lives or the mundane, everyday things, right? People aren't going on vacation to Spain every weekend, right? This is, like, a once-a-year thing, but you see it, and then you're comparing yourself to it and thinking, your life might not be as fun or as cool or as awesome as this person's, right? But you're not... Again, you're only seeing the greatest hits, right? No one's going to show you like the horrible bad times. So I think for my kids, it's going to be weird. They're never going to know a world that's different. Like, I think it's weird. They're going to think it's normal. And as far as like going back, technology just kind of always progresses. Like whether it's like medieval technology and, new ways to build castles in the 1300s, or if it's, like new, like your Apple Watch detecting that you're having a heart attack and the thing like calling 911. Right. So I think there's some really cool stuff going on, and I don't think there's any way to really prevent technology. I just think there's ways to like maybe put parameters on it or guidelines or, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, even from that question, it seems like I would be able to figure out the answer to this. But do you consider yourself more of a pessimistic person or an optimistic person? And why do you think that?
I think I'm definitely an optimistic person. I'm always looking for, the silver lining. And I think a lot of that has to do with just really how I was raised, right? My parents always just kind of instilled in me to try and find the good in everything. And like, even when things are bad, there are still things that are good going on. Plus, I just think it's like, it hurts to just be negative all the time. And just be mad and angry and just complaining and, just finding the horrible and everything.
Yes.
And I mean, if you really want to look, then like, there's bad things going on all over the place. But then on the other end of that, like logically you can say, but there's all these beautiful things going on as well. So, like, how would you rather live your life? Like thinking about all the negative, horrible things going on, or about thinking about all the positive, great things and like just controlling what you can?
Yeah.
right? So I definitely optimist, definitely raised that way. But, you know, I think it also took a while for that to click in me. I think when I was a younger person, I definitely was like frustrated and angry. And, you know, I think, you know, just some things going on in my life with, you know, because my parents were divorced and then just being kind of like torn out of like moving to, you know, Colorado and being torn away from my like sports friends. And like I had a lot to be mad and angry about. And I think it just takes so much energy. And it's just a waste of time to be bitter.
Yeah.
It just sucks.
It's definitely not a good use of time to always be thinking about the negative. It's, you know, if you're looking for a quick short-term solution, if you're struggling with like mental health, if you just try and focus on what's good, you know, it'll give you so much more happiness in your life if you're just looking for the good. And it's easy to look for the bad, for sure.
Yeah.
You could always, it really just depends on the lens that you look at life. But if you look at life the way that you do, or the way that I see myself looking at it, I think you can find a lot more joy in life just by looking at the positive, for sure.
I definitely agree wholeheartedly.
And like you said, it takes a lot of energy to stay mad all the time, and it takes a lot out of you. It makes you feel bad. So,
well, and I think with our current climate of like the last couple of years of like going into COVID and coming out of COVID, there's so many people that are so mad and just angry, and it just takes a lot of energy.
Yes, it does.
And I don't know, like filming people and posting things, and like just you see these Facebook threads with like 3,426 comments, and like I have friends where I'll be like scrolling past on like the socials, and they'll be like commenting on it and like arguing with people that one may not even be real, right? Like maybe some bot.
Yeah.
Two, like getting so fired up, and like you can look at these threads and like they've been commenting back and forth. It's like, what are you doing all day?
Yeah.
Like, you really have the time to like put forth all this effort to argue with someone you don't even know, or like doesn't really matter, and like, you know, you're not going to change people's minds through like one Facebook comment or one Insta comment. Like, you know, like changing people's minds like takes a while. So for you to try and, you know, like browbeat your opinion into other people, I don't know. It just kind of seems like a waste.
Yeah, and you can definitely relate that negative mindset to social media for sure, because I was also thinking about it when you said, you know, how everything, there's people arguing. Well, then you also look at the news stations, and the news that's a huge conversation that I'm sure we've probably had in psychology class about how the news stations are always portraying the bad stuff. They're always talking about the murders and the homicides and everything that's going wrong. Then you go on social media, it's the same thing. People are arguing on Twitter all the time and Instagram. And so it kind of just seems like social media is the backside of the technological innovation that's happening, for sure. And so, I don't know, maybe my question to you is like, if you were to restructure it, how would you do it? Especially just for like the news. How would you structure the news? Would it be a mix of good and bad? Would it be just good like Sunday morning, or what would your outlook be?
I mean, I don't know. Like, does the news have to tell us the bad?
Yeah.
Like, I think we know that like murders and violence and car crashes are happening, and I mean, just like, do we need to know those things? Like every horrible thing that happens, you know, I think the news could do a little bit better of a job. But I mean, I don't know. Like maybe, that's a really great question. That's tough to answer, Grant. I think, you know, like could you do like one, you know, darker story, and then you have to do a lighter story?
Yeah.
Are there like news stations where if you want the violent murder, bloodiness, you watch this type of news, and if you want the good, but then remember, like then you're living in an echo chamber, and you're just the confirmation bias is running rampant, and you're only hearing stories, right? So like then you've got problems on that end. But then to go back to like what you talked about, like in the very beginning of this kind of like part, is like you're correct. Like the news are just showing us the bad, so we just think the world is bad, right? Like think about those heuristics in psychology. Right, we're like making shortcuts and we're creating schemas, and we just, you know, all we hear about this big city is just violence and murder. So whenever I think about this big city, it's like a violent, murderous, bad place to go. Don't ever go there, right? So I don't know what the right answer would be. And like to redesign social media, I really think that like kids shouldn't get it until like they're older. I don't know if 18 is right. I don't know if 16 is right. I don't know if 14. I think in France they like don't allow cell phones in high school. Like you can't have a phone in school till after you move on to college or secondary. I forget what they call it, right? So I don't know, but I think it's doing a number on young people. I think the other thing is, what's interesting is it's become like a virtual babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are some people that are kind of like, oh, I don't want to really, deal with my kid. Like, here, take this tablet and this will occupy your time.
Yeah.
Right? There's been multiple times when we've gone out to eat and we try and like talk and play tic-tac-toe and draw on the kids menu and like play heads up or like have these conversations or do something fun where we look over at another table and it's like two parents and two kids and they're all staring at tablets.
Yeah.
Like, we were at a restaurant once and like these parents let this kid bring in like his Xbox.
No
the kid
way.
Brought, like, a
Are you
monitor.
serious?
Yes, it was like sitting at the end of the booth.
No
like,
way.
had a game console set up.
He was
so
gaming.
I don't know. That's not for me, but yeah, but I mean, isn't that always the thing? Like, how do we make the world a better place? Like, you've got to raise your kids, right? And like, but then you knowingly you're seeing people out there raising their kids maybe not a little right or not the way you agree with, and you can't. Now you're going to have those kids becoming parents someday, kind of like just perpetuating the problem,
Right.
right? So I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about would even be like, so let's say we were to change the news to make it all good. And then one argument that I've heard people make is, well, then you're not in the loop. And maybe that's not such a bad thing, but maybe you would be so surrounded by good that you forget that there is bad. And I can kind of see how that could be maybe an issue if you don't realize that, maybe you are in a really awesome position. Like, part of the bad is maybe good for you in the sense that if I know that people are struggling somewhere else, it gives me an opportunity to realize that I'm lucky. But if you're always surrounded by the good, you never know that there is bad. So maybe you do need I don't know. I don't know if you need a little bit of both. It is a tough question
Well, I think going back, so like ignorance is bliss, right? Like the things you don't know can't hurt you, right? So I was recently, when I was getting tattooed recently, I was talking to the guy tattooing me, and we were talking a lot about like politics and what I do and how I'm a teacher, and he was just kind of like a little bit on the same vein, like, why do you care? Like, why do you always have to look? Why do you have to know? Like, why do you care about politics? Why do you like look into like COVID numbers or why do you care about what's going on in Europe or China or something? And I don't know. I've just always cared.
Yeah.
Right? But he brings up a really good argument that like, hey, like none of this stuff brings me down because I don't look into it and I don't know and I don't care. Right. So that ignorance is bliss mentality, which I definitely agree with. So I see both sides, right? But for me, I just would much rather be informed. Like, I would much rather kind of be well-rounded. But I was also reading something just the other day that was like, hey, like at the end of the day, kind of when you're weighing, right, like the way your life is turned out, like, would you rather have like, spent all this time and energy, like loving your kids and your family and done all this stuff, or, that you were hypersensitive to politics for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, all about politics, but, for the last 30 years you've been doing this, but at the end of the day, does that really matter?
Yeah.
Right? So
it's a great question.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's like, hey, you could have been, playing baseball, but you're inside reading books about, elections in the 1920s. It's like at the end of the day, does that stuff really matter, or does it really matter like spending time with your kids or your family, or being outside and snowboarding and stuff like that?
Right.
So I see both sides.
Yeah, and that definitely is one of the things that sometimes helps me get off of the social media. Is even thinking about it now, it's like I already feel like I wasted a lot of my life just being on social media. So then it's, if I think about it that way, how would I want to look in the next 5-10 years of how I've used my time? I don't want to be on social media as much as I've been. It's always a goal for me, and hopefully for other people my age, is to get it off it more, because it really is more beneficial to get off it than to just always be involved with it. But
Well, you've always been very good about putting your phone away, right? Like we got
Yeah.
the phone zone in my class, and you're one of like maybe less than 5 students who put it in there most mornings, right? Like you definitely, I noticed you did a conscious effort to kind of put it down. And for me, it's kind of like my attitude with video games. Like I do like video games a lot, but I like them a lot when it's like dark and it's nighttime.
Yeah.
So like live your life during the day,
Yeah.
go outside,
Right.
play, right? Go play basketball, go hike Castlewood Canyon, go do all that stuff. And then, at night when you can't be basketball
Yes.
when you're hiking, right? Then like
Yes.
maybe settle in and play some video games for
Yeah.
a while. But like when it's noon and it's 83 degrees out in straight sun, it's kind of
Yeah.
like, hey, I should be going to do sunny things. Like this is more of a nighttime
yeah,
activity. And
such a good point.
yeah, so I think that you can definitely balance both. But I hear you. It's better if we all put our phones down and just kind of go outside.
Yeah. Well, one thing, kind of to take it on a different note, I remember when we were in psychology class, and you've told this story a couple times. I don't remember what unit it was on. Oh, it was on like why people help others if there's no reward or if there is a reward. And I remember you telling the story of you and your dad witnessing like a motorcycle accident. Would you tell us a little bit about that and
Sure.
what it means to you? And
Sure. So my dad and our whole family were out. The Sumners all like to drink coffee, so we were at a coffee shop drinking coffee, and we went to leave, and we were all saying goodbye, and we all got in our cars, and I remember my dad, we were stopped at this light off this highway, and my dad was going left to get on the highway, and I was turning right to go the opposite way on the highway, and right in front of us, it took some time to really figure out what happened, but right in front of us there was a massive accident, and one of the cars was exiting the highway and turned right in front of a motorcyclist going the other direction, probably going like 60 miles an hour, and basically the motorcyclist and the passenger on the back hit, like basically T-boned this car going across their lanes right in front of them. And what ended up happening is like nothing really happened I shouldn't say nothing happened in the car to the car people, because they were definitely traumatized and emotional, so there's definitely something there. But as far as physically, nothing really happened to them. Mentally, definitely. But so the guy on the motorcycle was in a real bad way, and his significant other girlfriend flew across the intersection, and she had like a compound fracture, and like her femur was sticking out of her jeans. And at first, my dad and I ran over to the person driving the motorcycle, and we were trying to help that person, and somebody else got out of their car and ran over to us to also lend a helping hand, and she was like, I am an emergency room nurse. This person is not alive anymore, or is on the verge of passing away. I will take care of this person. You need to go over and help the other person. So we went over and helped the other person to the best that we could. I think the toughest part was watching my dad kind of do the conversing with her, because I was just silent, stunned, holding her hand. And she was asking, like, is so-and-so still alive? Are they still alive? And my dad at the time knew that they weren't, but told them that they were. And for a long time, I always questioned that decision, and I know now why he did it, right, to keep her calm and to keep her from going into shock. And what was done at that point, and it didn't really matter. And like at first I was kind of like, why would he not be honest with her? And like I said, now I know. But yeah, so that kind of happened right in front of us, and like this was all within maybe like 4 or 5 minutes. This whole story and scenario went down before there were like ambulance and cops everywhere. And I kind of like got back into my car and got my car out of the intersection, and then kind of just like broke down. And I don't think I've ridden a motorcycle since. I think I've definitely ridden a dirt bike up in Rampart or up in the mountains a little bit, but I definitely probably will never ride like a street bike again.
Yeah. Well, what's really commendable is just you guys, it seemed like it was an automatic reaction to go help these people. And I don't think a lot of people can say the same, because obviously a lot of people also saw it, if I were to guess. And so, what makes you think that, why did you guys go? Why were you two the ones that decided we're going to help this person? And is that just how you were raised as well, or what was it?
I think it is a testament to my parents and just helping people out and helping take care of people. Because they were both in the Army, right? So they were both Army.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of come from a long line of, trying to help others. And, I don't really know why I just got out of my car. I think this is what I said to you guys during class. I think there are people that like run into fires, and there are people that run away from fires, right? So like, why are there like firemen and smoke jumpers and police officers, right? Were knowingly that like put their lives in danger on most days. I just think that's kind of like in their personality and in their nature, and that's kind of what I think happened.
Mm-hmm.
And, like going back and thinking about the psychology of like helping and stuff, like I don't know if I saw my dad get out first, and like that was kind of like my, physical like indication, like, yo, get out and help me help them. Like I can't really think back to that at this point, but it just always seems like I kind of like, I'm curious too. Like I have definitely a morbid curiosity, and I do, no offense to anyone that like was involved, but it didn't like scare me or anything. Like I was kind of like, what just happened? Maybe seeing my dad get out, like I'm gonna get out, like I need to get over there. I need to see what's happening, and then my dad kind of being like, do this, grab this, hold this. Right, I kind of just was like, okay, and just kind of like snapped like into attention and just kind of started helping.
Yeah.
It was on a right to be the forever optimist that Mr. Sumner is. I think the only, maybe not the only great thing to come out of this, if there is a great thing, but the person on the back of the motorcycle was pregnant. Her baby lived, and for a couple years after it, my dad actually would still go visit her and the baby, and he kind of kept, until he passed away, he kept in touch with them for the couple years after the whole incident happened. And like, I don't know if we saved the baby's life, but definitely like, that was like another part of it that kind of ended up. And then I ended up, I don't think I've ever told you guys, but I used to write history songs. And I would write a song, and I would use like the lyrics in the song, like you guys as students would have to figure out like what topic or what vocabulary term or theme I was singing about. And then at the end, right, I would always do it at the end of the unit, and I would use it as review, like, hey, let's review Vietnam, or let's review, the Civil War, or let's review World War I. And then I would have you guys write lyrics as a class, right, because I would usually make it like A, B, B, or A, B, so you guys could really pick up on like the rhyming scheme. And then you guys would write lyrics, and then I would sing your lyrics at the end of the song. I actually wrote a song because the person on the motorcycle was a vet, and I actually wrote a song and used kind of his story as kind of the backdrop to a song that I had written about Vietnam. And if you look hard enough on the interwebs, you can find it out there. It is on the YouTubes.
That's a pretty cool way to honor him in a way.
Yeah, and I still play that song every once in a while at shows and stuff, all busted out. Everyone's always like, the Ballad of who? Like, they don't know who I'm talking about, but it definitely helped me kind of get through that piece of my life.
Yeah.
But still, like, it's a little, there are some like triggers, and when I see people like weaving in and out on motorcycles, or like cars almost hit motorcycles, like changing lanes on the highway, it brings all those feelings right back, and like, makes my heart double time and makes my palms sweat and get a little sketched out a little bit, because it was pretty hardcore.
Well, good thing they banned the lane changing for motorcycles in Colorado.
Right,
Did
and
you hear
like now
about that?
there's the lane splitting and
Yeah.
now like all that stuff, which is a whole nother thing. I don't know if that's safer.
Yeah.
Do
I
you
don't
know what I'm
either.
talking about? How they just changed the law? So now,
Well,
like,
what's the update?
well, there's lane splitting and then there's lane something else. There's two different types. Like I think in California you can lane split, so the cars and the motorcycles can be going any speed, and the motorcycle can go in between the cars. In Colorado, I think it's lane splicing or something. I don't know the term, but if traffic is stopped, the motorcycles can go in between the cars.
Oh.
But the motorcycle is supposed to be going less than 50 miles an hour, and the cars are supposed to be stopped. But if you drive down 225 any morning, it's kind of like the California law. Like they're just passing like
Yeah.
75 miles an hour, and they're passing in between two cars going 75 miles an hour.
Right.
So I don't know, but I mean, is that safer? I don't know. I have to look into it. But
Yeah,
just,
something new.
right? Something.
Yeah. Well, on a lighter note, you mentioned that you're the new Ultimate Frisbee coach at the school. So talk a little bit about the season, how it's going, and, what do you love about Ultimate Frisbee so much?
Well, so this is our second season, right? Because in a year there are two seasons. There's a fall season and a spring season. We actually went undefeated and won the D3 state championships in the fall.
That's
which was
awesome.
We are back again here in the spring. We still are undefeated, so I think we're 17-0.
Wow.
So we're doing really well. As far as why I like Frisbee, I don't know why I like Frisbee so much. I don't know if it's just watching them fly, but I really started playing Ultimate, never organized on a team, when I was in high school. Right, so we did a lot of like just Frisbee throwing at the park. And then I got into disc golf when I was in high school, and then moving to Durango I was playing. And then I think I took a break a little bit, but we were constantly playing. We were always throwing the Frisbee if we weren't playing horseshoes or something. And then I got back into it when I moved back out of Durango and just slowly started playing a lot more disc golf. And the coach of one of our feeder middle school team, the Goats, came and talked to me and asked me. Someone said, "Hey, I've talked to people and everyone says you're the Frisbee guy. Do you have any interest in helping coach starting a high school team? Because I'm the coach of the middle school team. My son is going to be in 8th grade next year, coming to Northfield. There's lots of middle school Ultimate players. Any interest in that?" And we tried to get it going last year, but it didn't really work. So we talked a bunch over the summer and got our ducks in a row and came out of the gate hot in August, and we got a team together, and it went really well. And now we're doing good. We got a game on Thursday, and then we have the state tournament May 3rd and 4th,
Wow.
I believe. And we'll be trying to win the D2 state championship.
Oh, you
So we
moved up.
up a division.
Yes, sir.
So we're now up. So D3 was a great experience, and we beat a team that was a very awesome, tough team. And I love the camaraderie of Frisbee throwing. I love just talking to people, and especially when it comes to more disc golf, just kind of being out there early in the morning and watching the course, and just all things Frisbee.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome, man, because you started something that the school didn't have, and now you're establishing it, and not only that, but you guys are having insane seasons already, really good results. So that's pretty awesome that you did that, man.
Well, thank you. I wanted to contribute a little bit. If I couldn't start a talent show,
Yeah.
I wanted to do something. So that kind of fell into my lap.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I mean, good luck at the state tournament. That's huge.
Thank you.
And you moved up a division, so if you can win that, that's it's big
Huge.
time. It's big time.
Yeah.
So then what? It would you guys would move up a division the next year then?
Yeah, we would go to D1.
Wow.
Yeah, which would be
That would be phenomenal. Yeah.
The D1 players, though, are very, very good, which would be great for our kids because I think we would finally get our first bunch of losses, and we would probably get smoked because the D1 players are very good players. But it would be really good for us, and it would be a really good growing moment.
Yeah.
And I think just as we get bigger and as like Jeff does, more work at the middle school, right? Because at the beginning of this spring season, we had our first practice and we kind of like look over and I'm like, oh my God, there's like 35, 40 kids over there. And the other coach and I were talking and we're like, oh, those are all the up and coming like middle schoolers that are looking to play. So, I mean, even next year we might finally have like a varsity team, a JV team, right? So we might have two teams.
Yeah, that would be huge.
Yeah, that would be huge. So it's going really well. I'm
yeah.
really happy.
It's definitely something about Frisbee that's really calming and soothing. And you can play it on any terrain, too, which is awesome. Beach, nice grass field. You could play in the winter if you wanted, I guess. But, yeah, something about Frisbee is really calming, and it's just nice to watch it fly in the air, man. It's sick.
And especially once you start understanding them and understanding the physics behind them and how they fly and how they work and just executing really cool throws and being able to hook them over people and around people and through people. Like you said, it just is pretty mesmerizing and can be really awesome. If you ever want to look up like top 10 ultimate Frisbee plays of 2023 and you'll just be blown away at how amazing they are and how athletic it truly is. And, I think sometimes it gets not like a bad rap, but it's kind of more known as like a counterculture, kind of like hippie, stoner type sport. That, people are like, oh, you're just playing Frisbee. Like, not a lot of athletics involved when it's very much the opposite. So
yeah, completely.
Constant running. It's a 110-yard field. So it's
a lot.
Yeah, you're bumping.
Yeah. Well, the last thing that I wanted to end with is kind of for all the seniors that listen to this podcast, we're all going to be leaving soon. And, the transition to college is something that, we're excited about, but something we really don't know about because we're not in it yet. And so from your experience going to college, what advice would you give to us as to enjoy college the best, to make the transition as smooth as possible or to enjoy college to the highest extent?
So I wrote down a couple things here. I think number one, I would say be open to new experiences. Right? I think in high school, right, we get pretty comfortable doing the same thing, right? We're at the end of year 12 now, right? You're in your 12th year, maybe 13 if we're counting kindergarten here, right? But, you kind of get locked into the same thing, right? And, all the judgment and all the stuff that goes on in high school, and you don't really want to step outside your comfort zone, and right, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. But I would say, number one, be open to new experiences, right? Like, get on intramurals. Like, go see that band. Take that ceramics class. Read that book. Hang out with those people, right? So I think just number one, be open to new experiences. I think new experiences are great. Number two, I would say just take care of each other, right? I think, like, when going back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, just like it seems like with social media now and just like all this access to information, it seems like the world's gotten a little angry, right? So I think we really need to take care of each other, and we need to start giving each other some like breathing room, and like it's okay to disagree, right? It's like not a big deal if you and your neighbor don't think exactly the same about everything. I depending on what it is, of course. But I think just really taking care of each other. I think number three, I put don't sweat the small stuff, right? So I think that goes hand in hand with taking care of each other and, being open to new experiences, right? Like, I always tell you guys this is not the end of the world. This is just the beginning of your world, right? You are just really starting to now become who you're going to be and going out into the world and stepping, you're not in your parents' basements anymore, kind of like doing, the high school thing, like you're really out on your own. So I would say don't sweat the small stuff, right? Peaks and valleys, like good things are going to happen, bad things are going to happen, but, nothing ever that you need to worry about fully. And then lastly, I would put, and this really goes with not sweating the small stuff, is like, who cares what other people think?
Yeah, it's huge.
Right? Like, you will figure this out. Like, I'm 42 now, and you will figure this out. Like, no one cares about you. Like, no one is watching you. Like, no one is judging you. So, like, don't think that, like, people are watching, people are judging. Like, I shouldn't do this. People are gonna think like, dude, like people are in their own lane. Like just stay in your lane and like make sure your job, you're doing your job to the best of your ability, and you're the best friend you can be, and the best brother you can be, and the best significant other you can be, and just really like nothing. Like most people are not paying attention to you, so like we're not as I don't think we're as important as we think we are, and that's not to insult anybody, but just like live your own life and like, do what's good for you and your friends and your family and like your sphere of influence in your world.
Yeah.
Right? Like the other stuff doesn't matter. And like I said, when you become 42, you're going to like figure that out. Like, oh, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks of me. It matters of like what my children and my husband, wife, significant other thinks, and like what my friends think, and right after that, everything else will work itself out. So just be a good person and look for the good in people and assume positive intent, and not everyone is out to get you, and right, just gotta be happy and have a lot of fun and do cool stuff and read good books and eat food. And, I don't know.
Yeah. Those are really good pieces of advice, so I thank you for that. Yeah. But I also thank you for coming on the show. It's been awesome to have you. It's been a goal of mine to have an interview with someone who, like you said, it's been 2 years that I've been with you in psychology, and it's been a blessing. So I thank you for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts with us. But yeah, that concludes another episode of Granted, everybody. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out.